talk a little bit about that experience for you and, what you kind of learned and then kind of how that translated into this year.
That's a big question. I mean,
Yeah, it is.
it is because there's just so much there to unpack. Um, I guess the first thing is, um, I had hunted mountain country in Maryland, and hunting that mountain country in Maryland had gotten me to Western Maryland had gotten me, I would say, um, kind of unmoored from the idea that I should be seeing deer every time I go out into the woods. And this was when I was quite younger too, by the way. Like I had been hunting for a few years, but I really had no concept of what I was getting into with mountain deer. And it's actually how I discovered your podcast. Was I was looking for mountain deer, input, and so what I did, I really got my teeth kicked in the first couple of years I had hunted up there. And then I started to looking into like, modeling deer behavior and GPS movement, and inevitably what came out of that was Spartan Forge. But, I'm a data guy and I'm driven by data. And one of the things that I found when I started to look at the mountain buck data was, not only are they wily old bucks that, really have a mastery of what they are in the woods to do, um, they, they're, they have, a larger home range, we'll say, when it comes to like the rut, and that if you're going to hunt those deer, you shouldn't be if you're seeing a ton of other deer and you're targeting a 6-year-old mountain buck, you're probably doing something wrong. Like if you're seeing tons of 2-year-old bucks and tons of does, you're probably getting winded by that buck that you're hunting, and he probably knows you're there. If you're seeing a ton of other deer, in most situations, not in all situations. So and then fast forward with Spartan, and I say all of that because I'm trying to set up my Pennsylvania experience. So I started by scouting with Johnny, in PA, a few years back now. I don't, was it 3 years now, 4 years? It's almost 4 years, Bo. Um, and Johnny, like I said earlier, is one of those few guys who's as obsessed with deer as I am. And I mean, we started scouting up there as soon as the season was over, and having long conversations about deer and what we think about deer hunting and how we do it and where we go and all of that stuff. And that first year, the year after, the subsequent year after that, I hunted with him, and then saw some bucks, didn't have any success, could have killed some younger guys. But I knew that I wasn't expecting immediate success when I went up there. Like that would have been a fool's errand. And then that spring, I ended up scouting with Steve Shirk and Johnny, and I think even maybe you one time, and we did a podcast. I can't remember, but I'm pretty sure we did. And I picked out spots that I thought I was going to see movement, and then or where I thought we would see deer, and we did a lot of boots on the ground. Most of it was done with Johnny, and then some with you, and then a couple of times I went with Steve Shirk. It seemed to me like there were lots of deer going through these areas, and I had found like a couple of smaller trails where I thought there would be movement. And I hunted there pretty hard and really saw bupkis. Like I think for 5 or 6 days or something like that, I didn't see anything. And then had some opportunities, and Steve had said, "Hey, I've got a spot that we had scouted a few years back. You should go check that out." And that was one of the first spots that him and I had went to. And I believe I went there and hunted, or I hunted near it or something along those lines. Again, was not seeing anything. And I was like, man, I'm just having a bad year. But I was committed to, and the reason I told that story about Maryland earlier was, and I say this to everybody who wants to hunt mountain country, like you're not going to see the buck until you see the buck. And that could mean 7 or 8 days.
Yeah.
And that's the time that I was getting into. And then Steve had said to me, he had said, there's another mountain over or another area over, like go into this area. And, I'm fairly certain that there are good deer up there, or somebody that he worked with or had guided had seen good deer near there. And at this point I was just like, I'm just going to go in there. If there's a decent 3 or 4-year-old buck, I'm going to take it because I got to get back to work. And, the wind kept shifting that day that I was going in there. So I ended up walking, like where he was sending me was probably 3/4 of a mile from where I ended up wanting to walk in from, because the way that the wind was, like, I started up the hill the way that he had said to go up the hill, and the wind kept switching on me. So I was like, this isn't going to work, because, with the thermals dropping and the way that the wind was being pushed over, there was just no way to get into that spot. So what I decided to do is go all the way east to like the point of this hill and then walk myself in. And I said, I'm just going to stalk this hill. Like, there's good deer being seen up here, because essentially, I don't know how to describe it, but like, if the hill's in front of me like this at an angle towards you, the wind was going like this, like up and down. Like, as I was going up there and throwing milkweed, I just knew I was going to get busted if I got into where I thought I might be seeing deer. So I came all the way from down the road and decided to just stalk across. And my hope is that I'd be aware enough to where if I saw something, I could set up and it couldn't wind me by virtue of the way that the wind was going up and down the hill. So I just started going from the total opposite end, 3/4 mile walk across this hill to try to get there. Well, as soon as I get up that hill, there was like a logging road. And when I got up to the logging road, I heard I've only heard this one other time before. And it was like a slow clicking grunt. I don't know exactly what to call it, but it was like, those noisemakers that people use at like parties and stuff. It's just like somebody recorded one of those noisemakers and like slowed it down 10 times.
Well,
I think I
know,
sent you a video of it, right?
Well, I know exactly. Well, you told me about it, and then a week later in West Virginia, the buck I killed did the exact same thing, and I was sitting under 20 yards from it while it was with a doe doing that, and I was literally kind of laughing to myself. I'm like, I hadn't heard that before, and then it was exactly what you had described, and I'd heard a couple other people talk about it this year too.
I knew nothing of it. I knew
It was
nothing
super
of it.
cool.
Yeah, and it was such a cool noise. It just sounded like take the grunt of a buck and slow it down and just make it a click every once in a while. I don't know how else to make the vocalization, but it's like a slow noisemaker. It's the only way I can say it. And if somebody knows, please DM me or message me, because if someone knows what that is called, because it is a grunt, I suppose. But anyway, it was loud, and that was the first thing I heard. And I was like, what the heck is this? And then I'm on the logging trail, looking up and looking down. So what I was doing was zigzagging across this logging trail, looking up, watching for a while, looking down, watching for a while, looking up, watching for a while, looking down, watching for a while, just trying to see movement. And I heard this buck, and it was pushing a doe that looked very young, and he was pushing her all over the place, and he was making that grunting noise, and he pushed her into a drainage, and I showed you the area. You've seen this, but there was like a drainage that went right down, and when they slipped in there, they couldn't see anymore. So I literally was crawling up the road on my hands and feet, got right before that drainage, and then got over, like, how there's a growth by the roads, usually where they mow and stuff, or when they're freshly taking stuff out. I got over that, which was full of all kinds of garbage, and then started to make my movement up. Well, he had popped out again with her, and she had gotten out. He got in front of her and moved her down back into the drainage again. And I just was crawling hands and feet. I mean, I still had my pack on my back. I had my stand on my back. My bow is in my hand, and I'm just going up the hill like as slow as can be. And I watched, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this doe blows right past me, and she's just like taking off. And I'm like, oh crap! Like, how is it possible that they caught my wind? And I'm like, no, there's just no way, because the way that the wind was going, and I was throwing milkweed the entire time because I was so afraid of getting busted because of how unpredictable the wind was. And she blew right past me. And then I looked, and I could see him, and I actually filmed it. He was like in this like cut, looking around, like, where did she just go, kind of thing. And so I pop up and just hang my bow on like a broken branch, and I'm behind like a massive old tree, and I just get my grunt call out, and I let a grunt out, and he immediately like looks over to my area, and I'm standing behind this massive tree on the ground, and I film again. And because he's probably 50 yards away or so. And then I one more, and then he kind of looks away. So I do one more like longer, slower grunt. And I'm just kind of, when you put your hand at the end of the grunt call and you kind of open it and close it and open it and close it.
Yeah,
It's a
you're
nice
just
long grunt.
controlling the pitch with the.
Yeah, controlling the pitch of the grunt, right? And yeah, exactly. And so that one really got his attention. And then he pops out, and I ranged the tree that I thought he was going to pop out in front of. But I said, as soon as he gets in front of this tree, like that's going to be your chance, because it was pretty thick up there.
Yeah.
As it came right out of this cut, like it was really really thick out of the cut. And sure enough, he came out, and I shot, and it was a little high on the lungs, but not. It was still a kill shot, and it actually, the arrow went through and stuck into the other side of the drainage. Like, so I could see it on the other side of the drainage, just coated with blood. And I was like, it's a good shot. This has got to be good. And I had, had some other experiences, I'll say it this way, that had informed, being patient when it comes to tracking a deer. So I said, I'm not going to rush. I'm going to sit down on the ground and just sit here for an hour. And I'm not even going to try to find blood. I'm not going to do anything. So I literally, and I don't know, people might make fun of me or whatever. I don't care. I sat down and like watched a podcast for 45 minutes and said, I'm not going to stand up till this podcast is over and start looking for this deer. Like anywhere it went, maybe it could see me. Maybe it was still looking at the area. Maybe the shot wasn't as good as I thought it was. I was just going to give this thing time. And then if I pick up good blood, I'm going to go and track. Well, the deer, I waited an hour, got up, found the arrow, started tracking, and the buck had kind of went up and over the mountain, like towards the other side. And towards the end, I started to lose blood, and I was like getting really upset. And I was like, oh my goodness, what is going on here? And I was finding just little drops of blood. Like it went from good blood to little drops of blood to where I'm like, oh, I might have to call a dog. What am I going to do? I don't want to do this. I'm up on the top of a mountain, like a mile and a quarter away from my truck. I just, the whole thing was deflating me, and I was just like, oh, this is gonna be awful because I'm not finding blood. And then I just looked forward and found good blood again. I get to the good blood. I get to the point where I'm back on my like hands and knees searching to see where this went. And then I stand up and look, and then I see him laying on the ground. I'm like, oh, thank God. Just like throw my hands in the air, like just super happy, thanking the Lord. And I probably should have packed that buck out, but I was like, it's all downhill. It's going to be, I got to get it over the hill, which wasn't so bad. And then I'll get it down the hill. And I was like, I don't care. I'm so excited right now. I'm so happy. The buck had like a gnarly rack. He was super old. Steve had not ever seen, had he seen, I believe he knew of that buck. I think he had said he thought it was somewhere totally different, or he didn't think it was going to be in that area. Of course, I wasn't hunting anywhere near where he had said to go and hunt.
Yeah.
I'd started in off of this point, so I was kind of far away where he had thought I should go and look. Because like I had said, I'd been hunting other spots for days that were coming up empty. So I don't know if he was living around that point or if he'd just followed a hot doe over there or what. But Steve had said he had been getting pictures of that buck for like 7 years or 8 years or something like that.
Yeah.
That I want to say, I could be wrong, and he'll comment on the video if I'm wrong. I want to say that he is certain, dollars to donuts, that it's at least a 10.5-year-old deer, and it used to be like a 160.
Yeah.
And I'm certain, I'm almost certain of that. And he had sent me some pictures of it, but he had never seen it on the hoof, and they had a name for it. They called him the Mountain Monarch. He was super old, had a massive rack like 2 or 3 years ago. Still had a great rack. Like, don't get me wrong, he was still a great deer, great rack. And so I pulled him off that mountain and brought him all the way down, and I was freaking. I could barely close my arms when I was done. Getting him down that mountain and off, and all of the area that I had to traverse through. But it was a absolutely fantastic hunt, and just you can't, I don't know how it could have happened any other way. Like it had to happen the way that it happened. Um, and you know, things pay off in ways that you don't expect. And it was what it was. It was awesome. It was an amazing hunt.